Every time you stay silent, you bury yourself deeper. You call it maturity. You call it peace. But every time you bite your tongue, you don't grow. You vanish, piece by piece, like a soul suffocating in its own skin. There's a kind of exhaustion no one talks about. It's not in your shoulders, not in your posture. It's in the way your laughter feels rehearsed, in the way your voice trembles. Even when you're saying "I'm fine," you choose peace over truth and call it strength. You think avoiding conflict means you're calm, wise, enlightened. But when the night comes, what's left isn't harmony. It's bitterness, cold, quiet, constant. Nietzsche saw the lie and set it on fire. He didn't call your silence noble. He called it slavery, disguised in moral language, wrapped in cultural praise, but still a cage. You think you're preserving peace, but really, you're building a coffin and laying your voice down inside it. Every smile, a nail, every nod, a shovel. This video isn't for those seeking comfort. It's for those tired of applauding their own disappearance, tired of being the bigger person, in a world that only loves what it can use. Over the next few chapters, we won't give you affirmations. We'll give you a mirror, sharp, unforgiving, built from Nietzsche's words, and your own silent rage. Are you ready to hear what most people spend their entire lives avoiding? If yes, stay. Because after this, you might finally meet yourself. And once you do, you'll never be able to unmeet you again. You think you're choosing silence. But what if silence is choosing you? What if the values you live by, obedience, humility, restraint, were never truly yours? From the moment you could speak, you were taught to shrink, taught that kindness means compliance, that love means endurance, that being good means keeping your head down. So you became what they wanted. You smiled when you were dismissed. You stayed when you should have walked. And you called it peace. But it wasn't peace, it was submission. Nietzsche saw it. He gave it a name: slave morality. A system built not from strength, but from weakness, born from generations who couldn't fight back. So they rewrote the rules. They made pride into sin, and submission into virtue. They made fear sound like humility, and silence feel like wisdom. Not because they believed it, but because they had no other choice. It was survival. And over time, it became culture. You heard it everywhere. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make a scene. Don't argue. Just be good. But ask yourself, what does good even mean? And who decided? Because here's the brutal truth. What you call maturity might be fear. What you call harmony might be paralysis. You've been conditioned to flinch, to freeze, to fold. Not because it's right, but because it's rewarded. You are not weak by nature. You were taught to be, taught that raising your voice is aggression, that setting boundaries is selfish, that saying no is cruel. So now, even when you're angry, you smile. Even when you're violated, you stay silent. And the world sees that and takes more, because what you tolerate teaches them how to treat you. Nietzsche didn't write for the tame. He wrote for the buried self, the one hidden beneath all your shoulds, the self punished into politeness, the self silenced by obligation. And he dared to ask, what if your goodness is just fear in disguise? What if your silence isn't turning the other cheek, but turning away from your own power? The chains around your soul were forged in moral language. But don't be fooled. They're still chains. And if you don't learn to break them, you'll spend your life being praised for dying quietly. If this message cuts through the noise, if you've ever felt trapped inside your own silence, take a moment now. Like this video, if it resonates. Share it with someone still carrying invisible chains. And subscribe to join us on this journey into truth, fire, and freedom. Your support through super thanks or super chat fuels this work, helps us go deeper, and brings more content like this into the world. Let's keep breaking the silence. Together, there's a fire inside you, but it doesn't scream. It simmers, quiet, controlled, repressed. It doesn't explode. It ferments, like smoke trapped beneath your ribs. You call it fatigue. You call it stress. But Nietzsche called it something darker. Ressentiment, a moral rot, born from the death of action. Every time you stay quiet when your soul begs to speak. Every time you nod while your gut screams no. Every time you let them cross the line. Again, that fire grows. And the worst part, you pretend it's virtue. You say, I'm the bigger person. I don't hold grudges. I let it go. But you didn't let it go. You swallowed it. And now it's living inside you. As tension, as numbness, as passive rage. You're not at peace. You've just become fluent in suppression. Nietzsche warned us. The resentful don't erupt. They rot. They rehearse the arguments in their heads. For days, weeks, years, they smile in public and bleed in private. They call it forgiveness. But really, it's fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of finally saying enough. And here's the poison. When you don't act, you justify your inaction with morality. You say, I'm not like them. Irise above. I'm more evolved. But deep down, you know that's a lie. You're not rising. You're hiding. Because real peace requires real boundaries. And real love requires real honesty. You've replaced both with performance. That's what resentment is. Truth in a cage. Fire under glass. And the longer you keep it trapped, the more it shapes your identity. You start to see yourself as the martyr, the one who always gives, the one who never gets. And you wear that pain like a badge. But Nietzsche doesn't pity you. He challenges you. Because the resentful person is not just a victim. They are an accomplice to their own self-erasure. Every time you avoid conflict, you feed the fire. And every time you feed it, you become less of who you are. So stop pretending your silence is noble. Stop calling fear maturity. And stop confusing suppression with strength. You don't need to explode. You don't need to attack. But you do need to act. Because resentment, left unchecked, doesn't make you righteous. It makes you invisible. They never told you to be strong. They told you to be nice, to be polite, to be manageable. And every time your voice rose, every time your will showed, they flinched. Not because you were wrong, but because you were becoming uncontrollable. So they gave your fire new names. Aggression, selfishness, arrogance, and you believed them. So you shrunk, softened your edges, folded your instincts, made yourself small, and called it goodness. But Nietzsche saw what others couldn't. He didn't see danger. He saw power. Raw, unapologetic, necessary. He called it the will to power, not the hunger to dominate others, but the primal force of life itself. The seed breaking through stone, the wave reshaping the shore, the soul refusing to die quietly. Everything alive wants to grow, to assert, to expand, to become, and so do you. But they taught you to fear that force, to equate self-expression with ego, to treat ambition like vanity, to label boundaries as cruelty. So you chose the safer path. You endured, you complied, you stayed quiet, and that will didn't disappear. It turned against you. It became anxiety, exhaustion, bitterness, shame, because that fire inside you was never meant to be contained. It was meant to move, to rise, to reshape everything it touched. Nietzsche knew true power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from reclaiming control over yourself. It sounds like this. This is what I want. This is what I need. This is where I begin and where you end. But this kind of power comes at a cost. You will be misunderstood. You will be called selfish, too intense, too loud, too much. Let them say it, because those words are the sound of your cage cracking. The will to power is not domination. It's alignment. It's choosing truth over comfort, depth over approval, selfhood over survival. And it doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts in small, silent acts. When you say no, when you tell the truth, when you stand your ground without apology. Because every honest act, every refusal, every boundary is a rebellion, a resurrection. You weren't born to submit. You were born to become. And to become, you must stop waiting for permission to be whole. You've carried weight that wasn't yours, smiled through expectations that suffocated you, bent your spine under standards you never chose, and they called it strength. They said, "You're so responsible. You're so mature. You never complain." But Nietzsche knew there's a difference between strength and submission. He called this first stage of the spirit the camel. The camel is obedient. It kneels, lowers its head, and says, "Give me your burdens. I will carry them all." It suffers in silence. It takes pride in being used, because the camel confuses pain with purpose. You've lived this. Every time you said yes, when everything in you screamed no. Every time you accepted their weight and called it love. But then something shifts. The camel's knees begin to bleed. Its back starts to break, and a question rises. Why am I still carrying all of this? That's when the second form awakens. The lion. The lion doesn't kneel. It rises. It roars a sacred no. No to imposed morality. Not to inherited duty. No to false humility. But the lion doesn't rage without aim. It doesn't destroy for pleasure. It fights to reclaim space, to protect its right to exist, without permission. And yet, even the lion has an enemy. A dragon, glittering, terrifying. Each scale carved with a single word, thou shalt. Thou shalt be polite. Thou shalt not disobey. Thou shalt never disappoint. Thou shalt avoid conflict. Thou shalt stay small. The lion must face this dragon, not with teeth, but with fire, the fire of truth, the fire of defiance, the fire of becoming. And if the lion wins, if it burns through those ancient laws, something extraordinary happens. The final transformation begins. The child is not naive. It is reborn, unafraid, unburdened. It doesn't obey. It chooses. It doesn't react. It creates. The child doesn't carry the old world. It invents a new one. From within, light, joyful, wild, free. This is Nietzsche's metamorphosis of the spirit, from the beast of burden, to the roar of liberation, to the dance of creation. It's not a theory. It's a path, a spiritual evolution. And you're already walking it. If you've ever felt broken, bent under roles you didn't choose, you've lived as the camel. If you've ever roared back, fought for your boundaries, reclaimed your space, you are becoming the lion. But one day, you must become the child, because rebellion is not the end. Creation is. When was the last time you were truly yourself? Not the version they liked, not the version they praised, not the version you polished, just to survive, but the raw one, the one that breathes fire, the one that refuses to disappear, even when the world demands you do. For most people, that self hasn't lived in years. Sometimes, not even once. Because long before you knew what you believed, you were taught how to behave, how to be acceptable, how to be agreeable, how to be safe. So you learned the script, smiled on cue, bit your tongue when it mattered most, and called it maturity. But Nietzsche wasn't fooled. He said becoming who you are is not discovery. It's rebellion. It's a war against conditioning, against the roles you were handed, against the quiet betrayals. You committed to stay included, because most people don't live lives. They live performances, masks wrapped in politeness, scripts dictated by fear. And the mask, it works. It gets you praise. It protects you from conflict. It wins you love. Not real love, but the kind built on approval. And over time, you forget it's a mask. You say, "This is just who I am." But Nietzsche would ask, who told you that? Whose voice is that in your head? And who benefits from your smallness? To become who you are, you must burn the script, break the role, and walk away from the character everyone applauded, but you never believed in. Yes, it's terrifying, because once the mask falls, you're exposed. No more buffer. No more applause for being good. Just you. And the question, who am I when I stop performing? This is where the real work begins. Because the pain you feel when the mask dissolves isn't weakness, it's withdrawal. You've been addicted to acceptance, to being liked, to making others comfortable, at the cost of your own truth. But now, you know, and you can't unknow it. So the next time you smile, ask yourself, is this expression freedom or fear? The next time you agree, ask, am I speaking or surviving? Because the price of being accepted should never be the cost of abandoning yourself. Nietzsche didn't promise you'd be liked. He promised you'd be real. And that is enough. Because the moment you stop pretending, even trembling, even alone, you're not performing life anymore. You're finally living it. They told you silence is strength. That letting go makes you wise. That walking away is the higher road. But Nietzsche saw through that illusion. And what he saw wasn't peace. It was paralysis. Silence doesn't make you good. It makes you complicit. So let me ask you, how many times have you swallowed your truth just to keep the peace? How many moments did you let disrespect slide because calling it out felt too uncomfortable? You told yourself, it's not worth it. But it was. It always was. It was your dignity, your boundaries, your soul. Every time you bit your tongue, you didn't just protect the moment. You protected the system that profits from your silence. The abuser, the manipulator, the one who knows. You won't push back. And when they see that, they push again, harder, and you fold until one day you wake up and don't recognize yourself, because what you've been living isn't harmony. It's self-erasure in slow motion. You smile when you're aching. You agree when your spirit screams no. You call it maturity. But Nietzsche would call it the degeneration of the soul. Not because you're weak, but because you were trained to see goodness as obedience, kindness as self-denial, and silence as nobility. But silence has a cost, and you've been paying it. With every unspoken boundary, every buried emotion, every fake yes. That should have been a thunderous no. You think your silence protects you, but it exposes you to manipulation, to exploitation, to a life that celebrates your vanishing. And make no mistake, the world notices. Even if you pretend not to, people can feel when you're afraid to speak. And some will use that, because every unspoken truth leaves behind a vacancy, a space someone else will fill with their will. So ask yourself, do you want to be respected or liked? To be visible or agreeable? To live or just survive quietly until there's nothing left? Nietzsche reminds us, you are not good if your goodness requires your silence. You are not kind if your kindness demands your disappearance. So ask yourself, am I silent because I'm wise or because I'm scared? And if it's fear, let it sting, let it burn, because that burn is the beginning of something honest. You think you find yourself in silence, in solitude, in stillness. But Nietzsche knew better. You don't find yourself in peace. You find yourself in fire. You meet yourself when someone challenges you, when your voice shakes, but you speak anyway. When your truth threatens the room, and you say it anyway. Because conflict is not destruction, it's revelation. It shows you what you believe, what you value, what you're willing to defend. Without conflict, you are untested, undefined, unshaped. You might think you're kind until someone crosses a line. Then you learn, are you kind or just afraid? You might think you're patient until you're disrespected. Then you know, is it patience or paralysis? Because it's easy to look virtuous when no one is pushing you. It's easy to look composed when your boundaries are never tested. But character, real character, is forged in friction. That's what Nietzsche understood. Only through conflict do you meet the self beneath the performance. Not the one who smiles to survive, but the one who draws the line, the one who says, I know who I am, and I will not vanish for your comfort. But here's the tragedy. Most people never go there. They avoid the argument. They swallow the truth. They call it maturity. They tell themselves they're rising above. But they're not rising. They're retreating, postponing the inevitable collapse, because a self that's never been tested is not stable. It's hollow. And the moment real life applies pressure, it cracks. So if you've been avoiding conflict to hold yourself together, understand this. You're not avoiding pain. You're avoiding truth. And truth causes tension. But tension is not a problem. It's a birth canal. It's the sound of something real coming into the world. So ask yourself, when was the last time you let the conflict happen? Let the illusion shatter. Let someone walk away because you finally chose yourself. That moment hurts, but it clarifies everything. Conflict isn't the enemy. It's the arena. And you've been benched long enough. It's time to step in. Because the longer you run from the fire, the less of yourself remains. Nietzsche didn't call you to peace. He called you to wholeness. And wholeness is not found in retreat. It's forged in the heat of truth. Let's be honest. Most people never become who they are. Not because they can't, but because they won't. Because becoming yourself hurts. It hurts more than playing safe. More than pretending. More than living a lie that earns you applause. Because once you start waking up, you see it. The fake smile. The filtered opinions. The careful edits you make to be palatable. Acceptable. Lovable. You start realizing how much of your life was built for them. Not for you. The job, the relationship, the beliefs you defend, but never examined. The boundaries you never set because you didn't want to make waves. And that realization is brutal. It's the death of who you thought you were, and the beginning of someone you haven't met yet. Nietzsche warnt us, this isn't a spiritual awakening. It's a funeral, a burning, a collapsing of everything false. And now you must choose. Keep the mask and remain comfortable, predictably, agreeable, or take it off and risk everything. Your image, your safety, your circle, even your identity. Because once the mask falls, you will lose people, guaranteed. The ones who only loved, the version of you that stayed quiet, that always said yes, that never said, this is not okay. Let them leave. Because they were never with you. They were with the costume. And yes, you'll feel alone, because authenticity is a narrow road. But what you gain is sacred, a self that no longer shrinks, no longer begs, no longer waits for permission to exist. Most people choose the mask because it's lighter. It keeps you welcome in every room. It keeps everyone else comfortable. But here's the truth. You were not born to make others comfortable. You were born to stop betraying yourself. And the pain of becoming is real. It's sharp. It burns. But it's the only kind of pain that leads to resurrection. Everything else is slow. Sil decay. So grieve what you must. Let the illusions collapse. Let the false roles die. Because once they're gone, there's space. Space for something true. And from that space, you can build a life that doesn't suffocate your soul. Nietzsche didn't write for the crowd. He wrote for the exile. For the one who knows that to finally be real, you must first stand alone. This is where most people turn back. They've heard the truth, felt the fire, seen the mask slip, and for a moment, they glimpsed who they really are. But when it's time to act, to speak the truth, to draw the line, to walk away from the role they've played for years, they freeze. Because comfort is seductive. It whispers, don't ruin this. It's not that bad. Stay where it's safe. And that's how the false self survives. Another day, another year, another life unlived. Nietzsche called this moment the test of becoming. It's not a loud explosion. It's a quiet war, fought in the privacy of your mind. It's the decision to finally say, the thing you've always silenced. To enter the room not as the version they tolerate, but as the real you. To risk being alone, in order to stop being fake. And yes, it's terrifying, because you know exactly what you'll lose: the approval, the image, the safety that came from playing small. But what you gain is everything. You gain your voice, your spine, your sovereignty. You gain a life that doesn't require your disappearance. But to get there, you must break. Not bend. Not negotiate. Not delay. Break. With the persona, with the mask, with the agreements you never consented to, but still obeyed. And that break will hurt. It's the pain of cutting ties with the version of you that made everyone else comfortable, but made you miserable. It's the pain of stepping out of the performance and into your real name. And yes, they'll call you cold, selfish, difficult. Let them, because they're speaking to the version of you that no longer exists. The truth is, you've always been too much for the cage they built around you. And now, you're done dimming your fire to make others feel warm. So ask yourself, are you willing to lose their comfort, to find your core? Are you willing to say no, even if your voice shakes? Are you ready to be disliked? And finally, be real. Because this is the final break. And once it happens, there's no going back, but there is going forward. Into clarity, into integrity, into the quiet, unshakable power of a soul that no longer apologizes for existing. This is not the end. This is the beginning of something you never had while wearing the mask. A life that is truly yours. You've heard enough. Now it's your turn to choose. Not comfort, not applause, not belonging, but truth. Because the cost of silence isn't just missed opportunities. It's missed identity, missed freedom, missed life. You've been taught to nod, to smile, to shrink, and you called it grace. But now you know. That smile was survival. That silence was self-betrayal. That pleasing everyone was your slowest form of death. And now, you get to stop. Stop apologizing for your depth, for your standards, for your pain, for your no. Say no to roles that shrink you, to love that erases you, to systems that reward obedience but punish authenticity. Say no, and let that no be the first time you actually breathe. Nietzsche didn't ask you to be liked. He asked you to be real, to look in the mirror. No mask, no filter, no apology, and say, this is who I am. Unfiltered, unapologetic, undeniable. And if the world calls you cold, let them. You're not here to warm the room by setting yourself on fire. You're here to stand, to burn clean, to speak. And if your voice shakes, let it, because every truth begins in trembling. Let them leave. Let the roles collapse. Let the silence end. You were never born to be agreeable. You were born to be awake. So wake up. Take the mask off. And don't put it back on. Because once you become who you truly are, you'll never settle for anything less, ever again.